Hey everyone, I'm Amy from Health Solutions. You might have seen me on the Wellbeing Hub, and today I'm here with Danielle Buckley, the workplace psychologist, and she's going to be giving us some tips on managing our mental wellbeing during complex times. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. And for the next sort of 55 minutes, we're going to talk a bit about maintaining your health and well-being during these really complex times. Thank you for your patience as everyone's been logging on and we've been working out how to do this as well at our end. This is really different to so many face-to-face sessions that we've run, but I think they're really unique and really special because even though this is a virtual session, you actually get a really fantastic opportunity to participate. And the best thing about this sort of participation is while you can see what all you're doing, you actually can't see who's saying what. So the way that this session is going to work is I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction into how we have a Zoom session, how we use the tools and the tricks that you can access and make it engaging. And then as we move through the session, I'm going to have some information, I'm going to have some opportunities for you to participate. So the first thing you'll see, we've got a whiteboard that we're going to show very shortly. And on that, you can write your thoughts, opinions, ideas. We're also going to have a few polls. And the polls are what we're going to use for some participation. And I'm really curious how you're all faring. And the purpose of today's talk is to really say thank you to you, but to also give you the opportunity to have a bit of learning, to have a bit of self-investment and a bit of time to reflect and digest how you can live and improve your life. So throughout the session, we're also going to have opportunities for questions. And there's a chat box on the side, and Amy's going to be monitoring that chat box. And so when you ask some questions, we're going to pause and she's going to be able to read the questions out. You'll also see in the chat box that there is a little part of troubleshooting. So if this is the first time you've used Zoom and you're feeling a bit confused or stuck and not sure what some of the functionality does, there's some things in there that should be able to help you. But remember, this next 55 minutes is for you. So this is a time for you to stop, take stock, relax, listen, learn, and just engage in some of this education. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss some of the common stresses that people are facing today, but particularly in roles like your own. We're going to understand the stress response, and I know some of you know this already, but sometimes even the people that know the most about the brain and the body still need a reminder to self-care. We're going to look at what good stress looks like, but also why we're starting to feel some bad stress and why uncertainty sparks a lot of fear and anxiety. We're also going to share a really practical model to regain a sense of control in our lives. And I love this model so much that it's sitting on the front of my fridge for my family and has been there for some time. Again, despite knowing this, sometimes we need to take stock and take time to have this as a reminder. So we'll explore some tips and practical tools that we can all use in our daily life to maintain our health and well-being. And that just includes some really simple things that you can do to still connect given the rules and regulations at the moment. So a little bit about me before we begin. I've been a psychologist for almost 16 years now, and I love what I do. I never ever imagined doing another job. And it brings me great joy and satisfaction to be able to help people. I've always wanted to help people, but I've also really loved science. And today, I want to use that science that's out there to help us improve the way we live our life and help us take a really scientific and informed approach to the way that we're functioning at the moment, because we need to be honest. And it's a pretty stressful time right now. And again, even as a psychologist with access to a toolbox, I'm still finding it really challenging. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today are things that I use in my own life, but they're all part of the science. They're grounded in best practice and our gold standard. So to begin with, I'm going to get you to have a little go at using the tools, and we're going to have a check-in. So we've got about 44, 45 people on the call, and I want you to start thinking about, how are you feeling right now? How are you feeling today? Is this a really difficult time for you? Some days okay, but most days are you finding hard? Are you maybe in the middle? If this was a scale of 1 to 5, are you thinking that you're either okay, you're neither good, you're bad? Maybe you're feeling pretty good. Some days are more good than bad. Or perhaps you're flourishing at the moment. Perhaps you are at your best. So to do this, I've clicked the annotate button, and what you should be able to see is a little bar come up. If you can't see a bar straight away, you just need to click on that annotate button and then go to view options. And that should allow you to annotate. When you can do that, you can see some drawing signs and some stamp signs. And what I want you to do is find something and then just put a tick across a circle next to how you're feeling. There's no right or wrong when we do this. If you're on a phone, you might even just put a little dot with a pencil mark or a line. It's really just to gauge and to start using the tools. Thank you for those people that have participated so far. Again, it's a reminder that no one can see who's putting what on here. This is just really to self-check, to start thinking about how we're all feeling today.
Okay, so how do we get the annotate bar up, please?
So to get the annotate bar, you need to click on, you should see the word annotate on your screen.
No, I haven't got that. Whereabouts on the screen should it be?
You might be able to click view options.
Yeah, when I click on view options, it says fit window, 50%, 100%, request remote control. Oh, annotate, there it is. Thank you. I'll go back to mute.
It's fine. We're here to help, and we want this to be as engaging and useful as possible. So you can use the chat box, and Amy's going to be on it the whole time. Otherwise, we can have some live questions too, of course. So what we're going to see already is that there's a really broad range of how people are feeling, and that's okay. But I want us to be really mindful of that, because I think this is really representative of the population at the moment, and particularly when we're going to work or we're with friends or we're with family, that people are feeling a different range of emotions at the moment. So thank you for everyone that's participated. I'm going to clear the drawing now, and we're going to come back to using the tools in a minute. So it's important to acknowledge that right now we're in some really complex times. If you're just joining the call, make sure you've got your sound on mute, just to make sure we're not picking up any background noise. So it's important that we recognise that we are in unprecedented times, and mental health issues are on the rise. People are experiencing really periods of prolonged stress and uncertainty. But it's important to remember that, as we just saw even in that table, we're all experiencing really unique challenges. Many of you are already in a role that requires resilience, intentional self-care and stress management, but now I think it's even harder. We know that in normal times, I'm going to say, that the World Health Organization reports that 1 in 4 people will experience a diagnosable mental illness. I have always thought that that is underrepresentative of the population, but even so now, and we're starting to see more and more information around how people are feeling and the surge in mental illness based on stress, uncertainty and anxiety, what's going on in the world today. We know for nurses particularly, this is even worse. We know that based on one study in Australia, 34% of nurses were experiencing depression, 41% anxiety and 41% stress. In a midwife study recently as well, there was a really high rate of burnout, with 64% reporting personal burnout. We had 40%, so almost half, on work-related burnout and 10% on client-related burnout. What this tells me is that your roles are hard, but we know that already. And now we've got this even added complication of what's going on in the world right now. So I think this is a really perfect time, not just to say thank you to all of you through words, but to say thank you through actions and acknowledging the hard work that you do, but also showing some signs and giving you the opportunity for some self-care and some investment in your own well-being. So let's talk about what's going on for you right now. These are complex times, as I said, but I want to know what your personal biggest challenge is, because we've already seen that everyone's experiencing a different set of challenges and feeling different, but what's really the thing that's affecting you the most? So again, we can use our annotate button. So we can click on annotate and we can either stamp, draw, circle. What's causing us the biggest stress right now? I love the image of this Picasso style drawing. So we're seeing a lot of people are facing uncertainty, and the changing work conditions being some of the biggest challenges for them at the moment. And absolutely, as what I'm seeing on this picture, a number of these factors then have flow-on effects for other areas. A lot of uncertainty and changing work conditions contributes to a low mood and a change in motivation. So many of these don't happen in isolation. But again, one of the great advantages of doing this is seeing how other people are feeling. And I think we can all see and validate how many people are having some really complex challenges at the moment. So thank you for everybody who's done that. I'm going to clear the annotation and move on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the stress response now. And I know many of you know this, but I think it's an important reminder that we know that some stress is good, but we also know that too much stress is bad. And I think what a lot of people are telling me that they're feeling at the moment is just like this constant pedaling, this wheel that's going around and around and around with perhaps no end in sight or clear goals in sight. And if we think about how people are feeling and what we saw early on in the last slide, that issue with uncertainty certainly and will certainly feed into this. So this is a really good diagram where stress is good and where stress is bad. So if we think about the stress performance curve, and I'm guessing many of you may have seen this before, we know that stress operates on a bell curve. And just for the people who are now joining the call, if when you join, it's probably best to put your video on cancel and on mute, but also with the annotation. I love the Picasso style drawings that are coming up, but I'm going to clear them unless we're using them because you can still draw on the slides. So let's look at this stress performance curve and let's have a little think about where we are. So we know that when we feel too little stress, we've got this underload. So we feel inactive, laid back. And this is probably a good example of us sitting on a beach somewhere, relaxing on holidays. But we also know that some stress is good for us. And we can get to the top of that bell curve, and at the very top, or just before the top, we're having what we call optimum stress. And I'm sure you can all think about a time, whether you've been at work or in a situation with a client or something that you enjoy and you've got that really good stress coming through. But then we start to feel overload. We feel too much stress. We feel exhaustion, and that leads into anxiety, panic and anger. And then eventually we start to feel and head into that zone of being in a breakdown. Now, one of the challenges with the complex times that we're facing today, and certainly a lot of the challenges that my clients are telling me that they're feeling, is that it's just prolonged stress. It's prolonged uncertainty. So sure, we can handle one thing going bad, but when it feels like there's multiple factors loading on top of each other, it becomes really difficult to find our way to the top and take control of our stress. So looking at that graph now, I want you to have a little go at putting a stamp on where you think you are right now. Again, remember, no one can see what you put on. It's just getting an idea to think about where you are. Thank you for everyone participating. And again, this gives a really big picture that we're all experiencing and feeling different things at the moment. And I think with that knowledge, it's really important to be mindful, because I don't think this graph and this spread of feelings and emotion relates just to the people on the call, but in fact, everybody in society at the moment, and certainly the people that I'm working with. So again, I'm going to stop the annotation. I'm going to clear the drawings. And thank you for sharing that. So one of the ways I like to describe stress and anxiety when we're thinking about how we can move through it or make it as productive as possible is to remember that fear and anxiety are normal, natural responses to challenging situations. So we know, and I know that you know, our brain is wired to turn on that fight or flight response when we perceive threat or danger. I know that I think sometimes anxiety for me is like a telephone ringing. It's a signal to us. And this results in a certain cortisol, an increased heart rate, our faster breathing, and focusing our attention on the problem as we prepare to act. So anxiety comes and it's a message, and it's saying to us, I think something's going wrong right now. We're not in control. We need to make a choice. And this is really useful in life and death situations. However, it's less useful in non-life-threatening situations, like worrying about what somebody said, or worrying about when our kids will go back to school, or worrying about how somebody is going to think or feel or act based on something that we may or may not have said. So this response serves us well in critical times, but as we've seen with modern day technology, as we've seen with this level of complexity in the world today, repeated activation of this stress response really starts to take a toll on our body. And this can result in us feeling depleted, empty, and exhausted. And that's where we're getting over to that other side of the curve. Now, I know that you know this, as I've said, I know you know this, but the very first step when it comes to thinking about anxiety is starting to think about how we respond to it. First of all, starting to recognize it. And when we feel anxious or when we feel stressed, what's the narrative going on in our mind? Are we thinking, I'm really stressed right now, I can't handle this, what am I going to do? Or are we saying, do you know what you're experiencing right now is stress. Let's put a plan together for how we can deal with this. And I love this image as well, because what we're starting to see is our children learning this at school. Our children are starting to learn the importance of looking after their mental health and well-being. And it's also important now that we as adults also take time to take stock and reflect on this. So why do we care so much about uncertainty? Amy, before we go into this, are there any questions that people have about the stress response? I think there might be no questions, so I'm going to continue on.
Sorry, Danielle. No questions at the moment. All good. You must be explaining it really well.
All right. So why do we care about uncertainty so much? I'm just going to ask you, if you've got the chat box up, I want you to think and put one word in the chat box. Why uncertainty is so hard for you? Without reading the slide, of course. Why do you think uncertainty is so hard? What do you hate about it? One word in the chat box. So we've got people saying the unknown, people like to avoid issues, fear. It's annoying. We can't plan for it, we can't prepare for it. Means we're not in control. Brings us anxiety, right? Absolutely. All of these answers are spot on. And in fact, I'm not sure anybody I know enjoys that feeling of uncertainty, enjoys that feeling of not having some element of control. We know that as humans, we have a desire for certainty. We love to plan and prepare for the future. The way that our brain works is we do something, we complete it, and it sends this message to us that next time we go into the same situation, we know what to expect. We know how to think, we know how to act, and we've got some level of certainty around what that outcome will be from our actions. I like to think about it like riding a bike. When we're uncertain about the future, we feel like we can't avoid threats or negative events. And this does result in worry or anxiety. And in these unprecedented times, we can't use any past experiences to predict or lean on to advise what's going to happen. And that's really unsettling. And it's not just unsettling for you on the call, it's unsettling for me. And I've been doing this for a really long time. But our brains turn to worry in order to predict what might happen. Our brains go to that place where they say, okay, well, what if this happens? Or what if that happens? And that acts for some people as a comfort. But you're really not going to be happy when I tell you that, in fact, most of our worries actually don't come true. But what they do is add to that internal level of anxiety and stress. And so often when I tell people this, they say, well, Danielle, what am I going to do? I have to worry. It's comforting to worry. But as you can see right here, worry does nothing to predict the future but make us feel bad. So what we need to do is work out what we can do and what we can't do, what's inside of our control and what's outside of our control. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that with you today. So we know between stimulus and response, there is choice. And if anyone would like to read a really good book at the moment, if you haven't read this already, it's a really well-known book by a psychiatrist called Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who was in a concentration camp. And in his life, he was surrounded by years of death, despair, disease. He lost most of his family members in front of him, but he survived. And he wrote this book and this reflection on what it was that kept him alive during this incredibly stressful and despair. It was a time of despair, but what kept him alive during this time? And he says that between stimulus and response, there is choice. So between acknowledging and seeing what's causing us worry, between acknowledging and seeing and perceiving something, we have a moment to stop and pause and respond. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Slowing our internal dialogue down and thinking about how we're responding to the world around us and how we're responding internally. So while we can't control our circumstances, we can't control what's going on in the world, we can't control when the government's going to make the decisions that they do and how they go about making the decisions that they do. But what we can do is we can control how we act and react to them. And that's what I want to talk to you about now. So this is a circle of control and concern. I'm not sure if any of you might have seen it before, but let's imagine there's two circles here. So take a look at your screen. And on the inside circle is what we call the circle of control. It's the smallest circle. Around the circle of control is a bigger circle, and that's what we refer to as a circle of concern. So when we're faced with a situation, we can either be in the inside circle, the circle of control, or the outside circle, the circle of concern. Now, when we're in the inside circle and we're focusing on all the things within our control, what we find is this inside circle grows and grows and grows. And this outside circle gets a lot smaller. So when we're focusing on things in our circle of control, we're focusing on things that are within our control and we have less worries, we have less concerns. I want you to think about a time that you last were in that place. think about a time when you felt really in control of your life. How many worries did you have? How much time were you thinking about all the what ifs? Or were you just focusing on all the things in your control? Now, again, I want you to reverse that and think about when you're focusing on things outside your circle of control, we find that inside circle shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and get really small. And we feel totally out of control. All we're doing is focusing on all the what ifs and what could happen. This model is the one I was talking about before as my favorite model. It's the one that I put on my fridge all the time. And I want to show you a bit about how this model works. So when we're thinking about things outside of our control, we're thinking about things in our circle of concern, we're focusing on the actions of others. We're focusing on the state of the world, the attitudes and reactions of others. We're thinking about unpredictable events. So all the things that actually us personally have no control over. Now, I don't know about you, but when the COVID situation was really bad and the curve started to reach its peak, I had to turn off the news. I couldn't even watch it. I couldn't watch it because every time I did, I felt that anxiety bubbling away. I felt that I was watching things unfold that I had no control over. And I felt really stressed and I felt really anxious. But what I could do is recognize that feeling. And I still remember sitting down with my husband and my son one day. I said, I'm feeling really stressed right now, feeling really anxious. And in our family, I'm making a really considered effort to always talk about and label our emotions so I can teach our children the problem-solving mindset that I'm teaching you today. And as a family, we came up with one action that we could do that was inside of our control. And that was, we decided to turn the news off every morning. And instead what we did is we put on music. We knew we weren't leaving the house for the next 5 or 6 weeks. So what was in our control was our behavior. What was in our control was our attitude. So our behavior meant the TV didn't go on unless it was Netflix. Our attitude was, I'm going to be really thankful that my family is safe, well, we have what we need at home, and we're just going to ride this time out together. Then I can control my reactions. I can control how I'm responding to things. So I had a very small window where I would look at my phone for updates for essential information that I needed. But then I would just focus on what is in my control. And that means I can also focus on my emotions. We don't often choose the circumstance we find ourselves in, but we can choose how we react to it. So let's have a think now. Here's some examples of the situation right now. Some examples of thinking outside your circle of control or being in a circle of concern is, what if there's a second wave? What if I'm not doing a good enough job teaching my kids at home? I can't handle social distancing any longer. What if it doesn't end? If I can't manage more shifts, what if things get worse? What if there is a recession? And you can start, even when I read these, you can almost feel that anxiety building because it's tense thoughts, they're out of control thoughts. But then if we look at the circle of control, we might be able to start thinking, well, I can focus on things that lower my stress. So I can ramp up my exercise. I can do everything to remain hygienic. I can stay connected with those around me through FaceTime. I can invest in my mental health. I can choose how I live each day within the parameters that have been set for me. So looking at this circle, the circle of control and the circle of concern, I want you to think about where you might be. Where are you spending most of your time now? Are you focusing on worries? Or have you really started to master, or always been good at, focusing on the things that are within your control? So again, thinking about the annotate, the first step is, I'm just going to get you to put a stamp, either inside the circle or outside the circle. Where do you think you are? More people inside the circle. This is great. A few people on the borderline and a few people outside too. Absolutely. And again, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, you know, some days are harder than others to do this. But I think when we find ourselves, that alarm, that signal, that phone ringing goes off that says we're feeling stressed right now, that's the moment where we press pause. Because usually when we're feeling stressed, we're looking for threat. We're perceiving what could go wrong, something's going to go wrong. So the way to mitigate that threat, the way to lower our stress level is to say, okay, what are my options? What can I do? I love looking at all the colours on this. Thank you for everyone. Thank you so much for participating in this. I'm going to clear your beautiful artwork and go on to the next slide. So what I want to do now, particularly given that you're all, or many of you are focusing on the things that are within your control, I want to think about what's working for you right now. What's something that you've started to do that's within your control that's been helpful for you? And I'm asking you this because, one, it's a really good way to share, but it's also good to see what people are doing. Before I offer you tips, before we explore some things that we can do, what's working for you at the moment? How are you spending your time to look after yourself and care for yourself that's useful? So again, to do that, we're going to annotate. But this time, I'm going to ask you to write in the text box. So I'm going to change the slides to a whiteboard. Or we can draw on here. And so we can write however we like. Amy, are there any questions while people are writing the things that they're finding useful at the moment?
No questions at the moment, Danielle. Just a few people saying how difficult it is to focus on things that are within their control, and how difficult it is to just feel that not being in control. But yeah, everyone seems to be on the same page with this. Some fantastic responses coming through.
It's a really good point, because I think, you know, and even in my experience, again, I think I said I'm a mum with 2 children who we've been homeschooling since January, and I'm in a house with 2 people working. And so I really want to stress, it is a really hard time because there is so much that's out of our control. There is so much right now that's uncertain. And for a lot of us, myself included, many of the coping strategies that we would normally implement were stripped too, were taken away for our safety, but taken away. And that makes things really challenging, because normally if we might go to the gym, well, it could be closed. Normally if we might take our family somewhere or go for a holiday, it could be closed. Normally if we might go to work, that's, you know, that situation has changed too. So that's why I really want to stress this model, that even if we feel that things are outside our control, we should acknowledge that many of things have been outside of our control. But even though that is the case, there's still things that we can do. So let's look at the things that are on the board at the moment. And this is such a great whiteboard. So we've got reading and meditation, time outside. Time outside and time in nature has been proven and shown to be one of the best things for our mental health. So for anybody that is, you know, thinking what they can do, definitely trying to get some exercise and be outside. Spending quality time with family, absolutely. Meditation and yoga. One of the meditation tools that I use is a free tool called Smiling Mind. I'm not sure if anybody has used that before, but Smiling Mind is by Headspace. As I said, it's free, and you sign up and you can download a whole series of meditations. The meditations last for 15 minutes, but they're absolutely beautiful, and they cover everything from sleep to emotions to stress, and they're also for families as well. So there's for children and for adults and for older people as well. I've got my nan doing those. I've also, we'll talk about this in a moment, I've also linked up my grandmother with my son playing words with friends. So we've got a bit of education and a bit of technology, but also a bit of social connection in there as well. I love that somebody said watching Tiger King. There's some great shows on Netflix. And I'd love to see this because, again, this is an investment in self. And this time, more than ever, is an opportunity for us to hit that rest and digest function. You know, normally we like to have the fight or flight response on, the higher level of anxiety, but now's the time to just say it's okay to stop, it's okay to pause. This is not going to last forever. This too shall pass. And while we're waiting for it to pass, it's time to invest in me. So when it does pass, I'm ready to go again. I'm ready to start the marathon. And this is our training phase. So thank you everyone for participating. I'm going to clear your drawings and go back to the slides. Oh, knitting socks is still up there. I will clear that. But I love knitted socks, so I love the response. So let's talk about 3 things that we can do to help us during this time invest in our own well-being. I'm really conscious as well, and Amy and I were having this conversation earlier today about the different waves of how people are feeling during this time. And I think when we started lockdown, or when we started the pandemic response, there was a whole lot of fear. And I think people then started to move out of that complete fear and into a stage of, I should fill my time, I should learn a language, I should be productive still, I should do all these things. And that's actually a really stressful way of thinking. It's helpful and it's good at times, but I think as we've been in this prolonged state for a period of time and we're starting to emerge out of it, we're starting to find ourselves back in a uncertainty as we think, how long can I endure this for? So the tips that I'm going to give you today are things that are recommendations. They're things that I know from the science works, and I would encourage you to make 1 or 2 things sticky. So 1 or 2 things that you think you can add that's going to be of benefit to you in the way you live your life and the way that you want to improve your life. I don't want you to come off this and think these are all the things I should be doing. But these are the things that I know that are effective, efficient, free, and actually make a difference to our well-being. So I'm going to turn off the annotate and talk about some ways that we can invest in our own well-being. And the first is around self-care and self-compassion. Certainly one of the things that I find dealing with my clients and dealing with people in helping professions, it's a stressful and busy time for a lot of us. But sometimes the compassion that we show others is not the same level of compassion that we show ourselves. The permission to be kind and go gently with ourselves, to do the things that we love. We know that when we invest in things that are meaningful to us, or things that we love, things that we're good at, it impacts and influences our well-being. So again, when we look at research in science, research in happiness, it's not joy or excitement that brings us prolonged sense of happiness, but actually it's meaning. It's doing things that make and give us meaning. And meaning doesn't always just have to be in the spiritual sense or in the religious sense. It may be a connection with a family member or a loved one. It may be writing a letter to somebody that you care for. It may be sitting down and reading a book with a child or doing a puzzle with somebody. Investing in our own well-being also means accepting that this is a complex time where there's not black and white solutions. And again, we crave that predictability. We crave that. We know that. We know that psychologically uncertainty is hard for us, but now is the time where we have to accept that. We have to accept that things are uncertain. We don't have all the answers. This is a new time. So this is my training zone for what's to come next. And the way I'm going to train is actually practice in really healthy activities like sleeping, eating well, and exercising. And I know lots of people, when I say this, say, yeah, Danielle. But actually, it's so important because it's our foundation. It's our building blocks. And on top of that, finding that time to reflect and be still. I see so often people wanting to have this obsession with being productive all the time, with doing. I'm not working, I should be working. I'm not doing this, I should be doing this. I'm giving you permission today to reflect, to be still, and just to take a moment. I also find it interesting that when I talk to people and I talk about things to invest in their well-being, people often say, Danielle, the one block is I'm too busy. I'm so stressed all the time. I'm running from place to place. I'm so busy. And I think you can agree. How often do you speak to somebody and you say, how are you? And they say, oh, I'm busy. Well, a lot of people now are telling me that they're not busy. Some are really busy still. But if you're somebody that's got a bit of time right now, or even if you're thinking it's time for a bit of a reflect and a readjust, take this time to reflect, be still, and reinvest in you. I want you to put a little stamp next to one thing that you're going to do. What's one thing you're going to work on? Self-compassion, doing things you love, mindfulness, better acceptance of complexities, or practical things, sleep, eat, exercise. Just finding time to reflect and be still.
We've just got some comments here, Danielle, saying that, being nurses, they don't have that much time on their hands at the moment. If you had to prioritize just, one quick thing, what's going to be a quick thing that they can incorporate?
The quickest and best thing I think people need to incorporate is sleeping. That's the first thing. And then eating and exercising is on par, because if we don't have the fuel in our body, it's even harder to use the thinking tools that we need. But then I would say, if you are not somebody who practices mindfulness, do that. It's 5 minutes a day. And actually, research has come out of the UK recently that looked at what are the biggest differentiators when it comes to understanding and improving well-being, and mindfulness and self-compassion were the two biggest things. So that's what I'd say, taking those. Any other questions?
Yeah. Not at the moment, no. There's a couple of people saying that they use mindfulness apps already and that really helps. So
yeah.
Great.
I'm yet to have somebody who says that they've started implementing the mindfulness and hasn't enjoyed it. And particularly if you're an anxious person, or you feel really stressed, guided meditation is for you. Because if you just start to sit still and try and get in that zone, what you'll find is those worries are the loudest voice. But with the Calm app or the Smiling Minds app, it's a lot easier to actually have a guided meditation, and you can choose something that's more useful for you. There's actually also a self-compassion meditation on there, which I use, and I think is
I love that one.
It's so good. Absolutely. All right. So let's clear that annotation and move on to the next slide. So moving on from ourselves, if we think about the next level of improving our well-being, it's about building relationships. And I know and I recognise that this has been really hard for a lot of people given the restrictions. We know that we have 3 psychological needs. So I know you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we know we have 3 psychological ones. So that is, we need to feel confidence. So we need to feel good at what we do. We need to feel autonomy. So a sense of being in control. And we need relatedness, so good relationships in our life. If one of those three things are out, our well-being will dip. So what we're seeing here is you need to actively invest in building good quality relationships. They don't just happen. So even if you're at home, I want you to use technology to connect with people you love. Check in with people. Use a video to see how people are. If you're having work calls, turn the video on. You get a lot of clues with how someone is going based on looking at their face. And again, I know that you know this, but it's a gentle and kind reminder. But I also want you to start thinking differently about relationships, about the quality of time that you spend with people, but also the relationship that you have with yourself. How you invest in that is also really important. And the third thing is about thinking about your environment and your wider community. So we said before, and somebody wrote on the board, that connecting with nature has been useful for them, going for a walk outside. What nature provides actually is a really perfect way to psychologically disconnect. So it allows us to have a detachment from work and from stresses. So I want you to find green space and immerse yourself in it. Just sit there if you need to. But that triggers that rest and digest. I'm sure if you thought about the last time that you went and outside, whether it was for a hike or for a walk, you always come back feeling better. It lowers your stress. So your community also still exists. And I think this is a really important point. It's just different at the moment. So the people that you saw and engaged with, your broader community, your social community, your church community, your work community, everyone's still there. Just the structure has changed a little bit. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to get creative with how you engage in those communities. So share experiences, share your challenges with others, but also share your coping strategies. Share what's working. I can see someone's put something in the chat box around energy. And I think you can all agree, and again, scientifically grounded here, that emotion is contagious. There's a lot of people that can zap our emotion, but there's also a lot of people who can be positive energizers. So something that I've put in my life is to invest more time with my positive energizers rather than my energy zappers. Because it's complex, things are stressful right now, and we owe that to ourselves as a way of looking after our own internal well-being. So we're going to come almost to the end, but before we do, I'm really curious to think about what you are going to do to invest in your well-being. And again, this is a sharing part, but something different than you've already put up, whether it be a tip that I've shared, or whether it be something that you've seen one of your colleagues implement. But if you're pressing pause right now and you're stopping and reflecting, and you're going to think about getting off this call, thinking about what's in your control, how you can improve your well-being, I'm going to put up the whiteboard and I'm going to give you a minute to write down one thing that you can do differently. So you should see the whiteboard up now. And I absolutely love the first response. Absolutely. I had my first haircut just the other week, and I cannot tell you the difference that little investment in myself made. Laugh, absolutely. Get some comedies out. You know, when we experience positive emotions, it broadens and builds us. So the more we zoom in on positive emotions, they snowball upwards. Like depression snowballs down, positive emotions snowball up. So we start to experience happiness that bounces to joy and wonder and awe and love. Absolutely. I love all these responses. Being realistic, calling friends tonight, thinking more positively, take a walk, listening to music and meditating. Looking up at the stars, absolutely. And it's amazing when we look at this, how grateful we can feel for being alive and being well. Buying home, that's so fantastic. Congratulations. Practicing kindness. Yes. So I want you to take a look at this, and I want you to remember the one thing that you're going to do as a result of this call, the one thing that is in your control, and the one thing that is sticky to you that you know will improve your mental health and improve your well-being. Thank you so much for all of your participation today. Before we close, Amy, I'm going to ask you, is there any questions that we can cover?
Yeah, so we've just had a question around any recommendations on meditation apps that they can use.
The Smiling Mind app is a meditation app. So it will offer short guided meditations.
Fantastic. So that's all the questions that we have at the moment. And just for that person that asked that question, a few other people are saying the Calm app as well. That's not one that I've tried, but I've heard that that's quite good too.
Yes, and I've also heard of one called Breathe. I haven't had experience with that, but I do know some of my clients use that and they really like it.
Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful.
A lot of people saying Calm app is fantastic.
I love that you're using it though. This is so good. And so again, if you're not using it, your colleagues are telling you how great it is. I love it personally as well. I'm on the Smiling Mind, but it's just that small little investment that we can make in ourselves. So just before we finish, I'm going to say thank you to you. I'm going to clear your beautiful artwork and go back to sharing. I'd like to just say thank you so much for participating on the call today. I'd like to say thank you for all that work that you do. It is with such gratitude that I get to be here and hopefully help you in just the smallest way, because I know how hard you all work and you're so appreciated. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation. I hope you can take one thing away. And if you want more information, please let us know. But I wish you all a happy week and thank you again.
And thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing your tips with everyone and giving them some knowledge on how to navigate this really complicated time. Thank you.
Thank you.